Good morning, America. Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy. Thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast. So, the IRS is doing this week of news and helpful tips for small businesses, and we're going to take advantage of this as well and piggyback on that to really hammer home and talk about small businesses. How do you start a small business? If you already have a small business in place, this is part two today. Um, what kind of issues should you be looking for? How can you make sure your business is on the right track? And I don't think we'll get to it today, but we're going to talk about closing a small business because unfortunately that happens a lot too. So we're gonna have some good information. Stay tuned, and we're going to talk about debt for small businesses and then what is good debt, what um, can really hurt a business as well. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, everybody. We've got an interesting show today, a lot of tax policy, but we're going to really focus on, a lot of overall broad tax policy news as people, regurgitate and think about the consequences of this huge divergence now between Biden's tax plans and Trump's tax plans. So, on one hand, I think it's good to have a debate. It's good to have a choice. So what drives me nuts is when both sides of political parties, they say the same thing when in reality they both do things that are very different, and that's true on both sides of the aisle. Again, um, again, Republicans and Democrats can often be just two faces of the same coin. Um, but we're going to focus on today is small businesses, how to help small businesses start up, how to do it right, what are some of the pitfalls, and we're going to move more into how to operate your business and avoid pitfalls. What are some of the taxes you have to be aware of and concerned with? And a lot of people just don't even know this information. And if you do know, this is a good review, and you can pick up some helpful tips and hints, and you'll learn from others' mistakes through this process. So, first article we want to share. And this is, again, this is from Fox News. It's just I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it goes to the college protests. So I ignored this story for the first week or so, um, but now it's spreading, and so now there's political repercussions happening where um, Republicans in Congress, and I'll talk, and again, it doesn't have any way of happening right now, but when you have, there's Title IX, where you have to prevent discrimination. Now, I don't care which way you slice it, discrimination is clearly happening on these campuses. So, um, Jews are being targeted. They've been threatening with genocide, with intifada. I don't care where your sympathies lies, Palestinian or Jewish. Um, right now, Jewish students and professors are being targeted. This is exactly what Title IX is supposed to prevent. Again, racial hatred, racial bigotry, and the administration treating one group differently than another. My own opinion, this has been going on for quite some time, and now it is just so blatant and obvious that politicians have to do something about it. The problem is it's an election year. Not only is it an election year, but there's political consequences if the Biden administration is seen cracking down too much on Palestinians. So that's why, or supporters of Palestinians. So that's why you see them talking out of both sides of their mouth. So they actually rebuked Israel openly, but had no teeth to it. They told them, don't do this, but if they do it, there's absolutely um, no consequences. So I would rather see a clear difference. Either we support Israel or we don't. Either they're our closest allies in the Middle East or they're not. And so let's have a distinction here. So people can then make an informed decision and vote clearly, but it seems there's so much confusion here as to what is our actual policy, that it's very confusing on the world stage. Now, getting back to tax issues, because of these violations of Title IX, and the federal government is funding these schools. There's all kinds of federal tax money that flows into the schools, and so they're talking about suspending all this taxpayer money going to the schools that aren't complying, that aren't doing enough, and allowing people to break all the university rules. So again, that's a huge lawsuit, that they're not treating groups fairly and equally, that they're allowing them to take over administration buildings, to set up semi-permanent camps, that the protests are racially driven against Zionists. I mean, and you can claim what you want that they're not. But the truth of the matter is, if you listen to Chance, you listen to what they're saying, you look at where these groups have come from, they are actively claiming, advocating for the destruction of Israel, genocide of Jews, river to the sea, all that ridiculous language. I'm going to call it ridiculous because it is advocating for genocide. And so it's, if you're gonna break all the rules, your federal funding should be at issue. And that's my 2 cents worth. So that would again, this is yet to be seen. We've had protests in the past on college campuses. A lot of times the campus administrators have allowed this to happen. We saw this through the 70s, but I think one of the big issues here is that you have a lot of the staff, a lot of the teachers that are participating and openly supporting breaking all the university rules and targeting not only other students, Jewish students, but also Jewish teachers and professors. So this has really become a huge problem that the universities have allowed to foment and continue on these elite universities. Now, there are plenty of Democrats that are cracking down on this. Republicans too. I really think we need some serious changes on our university campuses to protect all people. And again, that is the law. And so everybody has a chance at a higher education, not just one group, or if you don't disagree with them. The whole idea of free speech is that you can talk all you want as long as you're not threatening, intimidating, and targeting a specific race or gender or people of a perfect, so the advocating of violence and the threats, and that's where this really crosses a line. So the next article, moving on from that, and again, I just think because it's such a big thing, and free speech is so valuable to our country, to our way of life, I do think that's a huge issue that isn't being talked about enough. And it's absolutely a shame that these college students are so uninformed, and they don't care about what makes our country great. So a little bit of red meat there. Sorry, guys. The next article, this one, I'm going to go and share this one because there's so much meat in this one. And this is, again, comes from the perspective of the right. Most of the critiques of Biden's economic plan are going to come from the right. And this talks about economic suicide. So a little bit over the top. But some of the justification that they're using is based on race. We need to raise taxes because of racial disparities. And just to summarize this, and this comes from the Treasury Department. So, and they did this analysis in mid-March, that white families disproportionately hold assets subject to capital gains tax or in a higher tax bracket, which means a hike in those taxes would benefit Black and Hispanic families that aren't in as high of earners on average. So, and this is the zero sum game idea that if we don't have enough minorities that are wealthy, the wealthiest in America, we're just going to target all the wealthy, and that will benefit part of America by hurting another group in America. See, that's the problem. Is if you hurt one part, if you hurt some of the population, that it's automatically going to help minorities. That's a zero sum thinking where, again, there was one fixed pie, and if someone has too much of it and we hurt them, then other people get part of the pie. And again, I think that's short-sighted. It's if this is the rationale behind it, it just goes to this idea that, again, we can't grow the economy. And the conservative way of looking at it, or the more libertarian way of looking at this, is that the pie is not fixed. And the pie is the GDP, or total wealth available in the country. And so this is the whole idea of Reaganomics, the Trump tax cuts, et cetera, that when you cut the federal government and cut spending, the pie, the actual production and productivity of the country grows. So as the pie grows, everybody's slice gets bigger, everybody benefits. And we're not targeting one group or another. So again, not only are they going to increase ordinary rates from 37 to 39%, 39.6%, they will tax more than double the capital gains rate from around 22% to 44.6%. And this is one of the highest in the world. China's is at 20%. We had lowered ours to close to 20% to be competitive with China and other countries. And this is 44.6% at the federal, and then state taxes will be tacked on top of that. So people would be paying over 50%. So what happens? And this is from the Heritage Foundation. It is a right-leaning government think tank. So Grover Harmon here, the Preston Bashers at the Grover Harmon Center. In the past, this is what they say. They see, before the tax ever took effect, investors would rush to pull their money out of equities subject to exorbitant tax rates. So if you had an investment and the taxes were going through the roof, what would you do? Would you leave your money there, or would you move it? Most people would move it. So here's the thing. Then U.S. businesses would be starved for capital, and they wouldn't be able to get money to run their business. And then this is what happens. You have a slowdown, and then you have investments and growth fall off a cliff. When that happens, everybody hurts. The pie gets shrunk, everybody gets hurt, and we'll continue this right after the next break. Welcome back, everybody. Just want to take a little moment, and we're going to dive into this article a little bit differently. So again, this article kind of goes back and forth, arguing that it's for racial reasons. It makes sense to tax higher tax owners, attack tax capital gains, and then again, so estimates that 92% of these preferential rates on capital gains go to white families, while as 2 and 3% for Hispanic families. And then, so again, this is a very small subset of the whole population. 4% of white families, or 0.4%, 0.05% of black families, and 0.1% of Hispanic families. They're saying it's going to affect only a very small percentage of the population. Again, I don't trust their numbers, but the problem is when you when we've seen this before, when you increase taxes like crazy on a subset of the population, what are they going to do? They're going to pull money out of the market. They're going to take their money elsewhere. They're going to take the ball and go away and play somewhere else. So if their goal is to attack the rich, based on racial reasoning, that's fine. But it's not. Just understand, it's not going to redistribute money. The only way money gets redistributed is through the government. So the government takes that money, or what's left of the money, and then the government, through programs, through welfare, through more spending, directly aids people on the lower income brackets, people that are struggling and have less income. So one of the things I mentioned this a couple of times, is the Laffer curve. So one of the biggest criticisms is that when you do revenue maximum long-term gains, which is about 28%, is their estimate based on the Laffer curve. So what is this Laffer curve? Now I'm going to jump to an article real quick about the Laffer curve. So this is, you can just, they have this article on Wikipedia. This is Investopedia, talking about the Laffer curve, history and critique. So there's, good and bad about this, but basically it's pretty simple when you think about it. Is that when you tax something at 100%, you're going to get almost no revenue, because nobody's going to do it anymore. The more you tax something, so if you start off at 0%, you start taxing something, you get more and more revenue. But there's a point where it maxes out. Beyond that point, they're going to go elsewhere. So why, if you're at 70, 80, 90%, even though the government is taxing at this high rate, people stop playing their game. They go and they take their money and they invest it elsewhere. They take it overseas. They might move overseas, the wealthiest, the billionaires. We're talking about a small subset of the population. That's exactly what they do. They say, bye, we're gone. You're going to tax us too much? We'll go elsewhere. They've moved from high tax states, New York and California, to low tax states in mass numbers. And then at the same time, if as a country we increase taxes, in the past, they take their money elsewhere. And one of the first things Trump did with his tax cuts was he invited everybody, bring your money back, come on back, and we're going to repatriate billions and billions of dollars. And that money got invested into the U.S. economy instead of being invested outside. So again, there's a lot of truth to this economically. So this is why Reagan was able to cut taxes, those high as 70% coming out of the Carter administration, cut it down first to around 50% and then down even more. But where exactly is the optimal rate? Depends on the tax. That's what people argue about. Democrats would argue that it's much higher. Republicans would say, look, it's much lower. This is where we get our most bang for our buck. And even then, just because you can tax and squeeze the most taxes out of people, a lot of libertarians would argue, should you? Is that fair? Is that just to have the government maximizing and taking the most amount possible from its citizens? So again, if you have more questions about the Laffer curve, go ahead and read through it. There's criticisms that it's too simple. It trickle down economics. A lot of criticism of Reagan's tax cuts, but I think it's very clear that over time, there's a number here in here that Reagan total federal revenue was $517 billion in 1980. He passed his tax cuts, and it's not just due to the tax cuts, but it's the economic growth. People went out and invested in the economy. People built the economy. Where economic activity exploded during the Reagan years because it was actually profitable to do so. If you're paying 70% in taxes, why work so hard? And that's a real thing. And it's needed out there. So I'm going to jump to another article from CNBC. And I think this is exactly a great reason as to why we need to have sound fiscal policy in our government. Now, everybody knows about Boeing. I haven't talked a lot about Boeing, but the planes fall, having windows blown out. I mean, there's so many problems with Boeing 747s lately. So they have a lot of serious issues here. Now, Boeing is a huge company. It employs thousands and thousands of people in excellent jobs across the country. There's some people, cheering the problems of Boeing and blaming on DEI and other issues. I don't care. I think it'd be a huge blow to our economy if Boeing failed as a company. And they have to make some massive adjustments to become profitable again. But right now they are hurting bad. And how are they getting by? How are they weathering these tough times? $10 billion in debt. They're using, their credit rating is definitely hurt badly by all this. It's hovering around junk status, but they still are a massive company. They were able to go and raise $10 billion, and they have the billion to go and raise more debt to keep their company alive and make the changes that they need to stay an ongoing concern. They believe they can access another $12 billion. Well, they have another $12 billion more due in 25, 26, and they have to tap the bond markets to be able to get to it. It gets a little bit more into the weeds, but I think this is a classic example of why we need capital in our market. When things go bad, we need to have the ability to invest. And what happens if we don't have money to loan and invest into businesses? If there's a smaller supply of money, the interest rate goes up. So, and people think there's just money from all over the world. There is, but if it's not invested if it's not being invested here locally, costs go up locally. So these are American companies that get hurt and harmed by the inability to raise funds. And this affects not only large companies like Boeing, but it affects smaller companies as well. Again, like the small businesses that we're going to be talking about. So there are real consequences in our market and in our country when we make it harder for businesses. Again, so this dovetails directly into our topic for the day, which I've been leading into it most of this time, talking about how investing and raising taxes is going to hurt small business owners more than anybody else. Most people don't go and make a business, and they don't put all this time and effort. It's very typical for small business owners to put 60, 80 hours a week into their company. It is a huge burden. There's so much effort put into starting a new business and running a small business. And so we talked about a lot of the steps here. And we're going to continue with this series of articles. This is what was shared yesterday. We're going to move to what was shared today. A lot of the same information. But key takeaway here, when you start a small business, Boeing is learning from its mistakes. And I hope they do correct them. I hope they do stay in business because they're a huge part of our economy. And it would hurt thousands upon thousands of middle-class individuals, not only middle class, but W-2 employees, engineers, all kinds of people, if Boeing crashed and burned. Would other businesses probably fill the void? Yes, but again, it's kind of hard to replace someone that big, and the economic impact would be felt in many, many ways if we lose large businesses like that. So that's why when these ideas that, look, we can just attack large businesses, we can attack large businesses. There's always a consequence. There's no free lunch out there. So small business owners put all this effort into building a business, and they don't do it so they can make $40,000, $50,000 a year and receive, all kinds of government benefits. It's handy to receive that when they're starting out, but the idea is that they grow, that they establish themselves. And so that's why when you have restaurant owners closing their doors due to increase in minimum wages, which is happening in California, or they close the door due to increased regulation, cost of food, everything has gone up. So you go to a restaurant today, fast food has gone up through the roof. It's the pressure and the margins, the profit margins on fast food is so small and thin that when we make it harder for businesses, small businesses, a lot of them fail. So we kind of finish up talking about the different structures, and we were talking about being a responsible record keeper. So get that in place. If you don't have good records, you don't know if your business is doing well or not. Most people just go with the calendar year as far as tax year until your business gets larger. A lot of larger businesses will choose a calendar year that makes more sense for their business. But again, calendar year is just typical for most small businesses. So one thing I want to say about being a responsible record keeper, not only does it help you know and understand what's going on with your business, but you want to surround yourself with good professionals going to give you good advice, help you make wise decisions throughout the process. And if you don't want someone that claims to know everything, because what we run into, and we see this a lot, is that when people, a lot of times I have people come to me and they say, well, I was told this by my CPA. I'm like, well, yeah, that's not right. But they don't know. They're not knee deep in what I'm doing. And all the time, people ask me a question. If I say that's a CPA question, it's very important for me to know the limits of my knowledge as well. And I'm neck deep in collections, but I don't prepare returns. Don't want to prepare returns. I'm too busy for that. And so all of that I refer to CPAs, and that's what they excel at. When someone asks me about business formation, I know quite a bit about it, but I don't form businesses. That's for a corporate attorney. And part of it is estate planning to help protect your assets. So you need to, and you should have a team, and you don't have to pay all of this, but you should at least know people that you can go and you can ask these questions from. A business coach is a great way to start. And some kind of, you can have a financial advisor, people that can help you through the process to make wise decisions for you and your family. So the first step in that is having a good record keeper and connecting with professionals and learning, because when you become a small business owner, like the example yesterday, you might be the best dancer in the world. You might be the best dance instructor in the world and open a studio. But the things you need to learn as a small business owner is long, and you're not going to be an expert in all of it. So some of the smartest people I've seen admitted they didn't know what they were doing, and they got an excellent team around them, and then they were able to thrive. So I want to talk about the different kinds of income taxes, and this is something you will have to know as a small business. So we use the example of a dance studio. So income tax, whatever you earn from the business needs to be reported. How does it need to be reported? First of all, your gross profit from the business is, well, not your gross profit, your net profit. And just to explain what I mean by that. So gross revenues is all the money that's brought in by the business. But then, let's say you have a dance studio, you have to pay rent for your location, you have to pay for any fees, you have to pay to probably have it set up, for equipment, you have to provide the equipment to your students depending on how you set that up. There are a lot of costs with most businesses, not all. Some are remote and they hardly have any business expenses. But you need to track all those expenses, because if you bring in $100,000 and you have expenses of $30,000, your income's only $70,000. So the difference there, if you don't keep good records, the IRS will tax you at your gross revenue, or your gross revenue of $100,000. So that's why it's very important to actually track those expenses. One, to see how you're doing, but also can absolutely control and determine how high your taxes are going to be. So these taxes are either, if you're a sole prop, they'll be reported on Schedule C on your tax return. And if you're not familiar with that, if you're not very comfortable filing that, use a professional, use a tax preparer, and don't, again, take this with a grain of salt. But if you have someone that really knows what they're doing, someone that you know personally, you can go to H&R Block, Jackson Hewitt, some of these. But the average person there is trained to do personal returns, simple returns. If you're using TurboTax to do a Schedule C, either you need to really know what you're doing, or you're going to make mistakes. And we see plenty of people that come from these simplified tax preparation programs, either things like TurboTax or others, and their guarantees aren't worth very much. They guarantee to defend you against audits for 2 years. One, they don't have the expertise most of the time to handle audits. But secondly, most audits happen after 2 years anyway. And they know that, which is why they give you a 2-year guarantee. So they'll help and try to fix mistakes for things that happen immediately, but for a lot of issues that happen later on, not very helpful. So just keep in mind, you have a business, most CPAs, tax preparers, there are some that are very expensive. If you have a more complicated business, you should pay the higher expense, just to make sure you get it done, get that expertise. You get what you pay for. But it either gets reported on your Schedule C or on an 1120, which is for corporations and all kinds of corporations. And then you have a 1065 for partnerships. Those are your main returns. Now, if you have a 1120, usually the profit, the profit off of the net profit, which is after all business expenses, flows through to your personal return. A Schedule C tracks that net profit, and then it gets added as income on the first page of your personal return. With that goes self-employment taxes. So again, I could spend a whole session just talking about self-employment taxes. When people go and they work a W-2 job, half of their self-employment taxes are taken out of their paycheck. The other half are paid by the employer. And so the government does this so people don't see the full impact of taxes. And we're coming up on another break, and we're going to continue talking about self-employment taxes. But this is another thing that burns individuals, causes massive tax burdens, is the self-employment taxes. So again, we're going to come back in just a sec and continue the conversation. Welcome back, everybody. Over the break, we had a new news article that just popped up on the ongoing issue at Columbia. Columbia University is actually trying to crack down little by little and try to address the situation. Instead of responding to the options that provided to them, the protesters just occupied the main building on campus. They were seen breaking out windows. They actually held one of the facility workers temporarily and then let him go. But they've been attacking other students. Anybody that doesn't agree with them, they've been attacking them. And so again, this is just a huge mess. And again, it's to resolve this. As long as they continue, this probably will require the police to go in and just grab people and throw them in jail. And they're breaking the law. They're assaulting other students. And Columbia's problems. And this is the truth behind this. This mess is going to affect higher education in a very horrible way, which is sad for all the students that want to go and just learn. Again, anybody assaulted, anybody that suffers injury, anybody that was threatened, They have a lawsuit against Columbia now because they have allowed them to break the rules and stay on campus rather than sending the police and clearing them out and arresting anybody that comes onto campus without permission. So Columbia has broken its own rules and opened themselves up to all kinds of lawsuits, as well as these other universities. And there are going to be plenty of lawsuits that are going to fly. So again, this is litigation. This is not productive for society. It hurts these universities. It hurts higher education, especially the reputation of higher education. And I think we're going to see enrollments drop. I think that a lot of these institutions that have been around for a long time, it's going to drop and it's going to hurt. Again, like I don't care bowling lanes right or left. When we have seen a major institution like that hurt, the repercussions are going to be felt throughout the economy. So going back to our topic, side note, that popped up after we started the show. Again, new updates are coming in on that craziness. Self-employment taxes. This is one of the biggest things that burns small businesses. So one of the primary reasons people, I just talked to somebody and hadn't filed for about 5 years. He couldn't afford to pay his taxes, so he just didn't. And it doesn't matter how much money you make, self-employment tax is one of the most most regressive tax out there, which means the rich and the poor pay the same amount. And even then, it caps out at a certain point for for wealthiest around 160,000. That if you make more than 160,000, you stop paying self-employment taxes. Really, because it's supposed to be for their benefit, and it hits a point where it's just an extra tax, and it's supposed to help people in retirement. And when the benefits cap out, the taxes stop. So if you're self-employed, though, you get to pay the employer and the employee's portion. So if you're W-2, you see about 7.45% taken out of your taxes. And that's for Medicare, Social Security, and there's a couple other things wrapped into it. But it's mainly for Social Security, Medicare. So that when you go and retire, if you pay into the Social Security system, this is so you have something to retire on. Unless you're a high wage earner, it's usually not much. It can be a couple thousand. But again, if you're just planning on retiring on Social Security, you're not planning well and you're planning to fail. Medicare is so you can use the Medicare system, and those taxes help support Medicare across the board, which again, that's a whole other issue. But the impact on self-employed people is that you get to pay the whole 14.9%, almost 15%, and so that's a stiff tax. And that's before income taxes. So when people talk about income taxes, that's not the total amount that's being paid. So right now, the highest rate, if you're in the middle class, and let's say you're paying 22%, you're making between $100,000 and $200,000, right? So you're paying $22,000 plus whatever state taxes that you're paying. So let's say that's another. If you're in California, that's another 10%. So that goes from 22 to 32% of your income. Then you add on self-employment taxes. If you're self-employed, that's another 15%. So now 47% of your income goes to just those three taxes. Between state, federal, that's 47% of your income. And those are for people that's squarely in the middle class. A lot of them are small business owners. Can you imagine paying 47% of your income in taxes? This is the reality, and how much it can hurt people once you start making a little bit of money. So that's why a lot of people, they do what they can to stay in a lower tax bracket. But when that tax rate climbs, if they get rid of the Trump tax cuts, that 47% goes to 51%. So this is why people use deductions. This is why they itemize. This is why people do what they can to not be paying half of their income in taxes. And that's not all the taxes by any means. So again, but the self-employment taxes are one of the nastiest taxes out there as far as enforcement. So these are payroll taxes. Now, if it's just you, on your tax return, you'll owe the tax and they don't worry about it too much. But if you have employees, you have to pay these taxes. And now it's not just your income, it's what's withheld by individuals that work for you. So it's what's withheld from their tax, their income, plus the other half that you have to pay in to cover both sides of that. So that's that 15% that employers have to pay in. Now, then you have employment taxes. So it doesn't just stop there. So these are state taxes that you have to pay. And each state is different. Each state has different forms of taxes, but you have to pay an insurance tax or employment insurance tax. You have to pay, typically, a lot of states will have a payroll tax as well. And then on top of that, state taxes or sales taxes, excise taxes. So excise taxes. So let's say you have this dance studio. They provide a service. They provide dancing. But what do little ballerinas need? They need tutus. They need costumes for every performance. They have ballet shoes that they have to get. So if you sell any of that through your studio, the one my daughter goes to, I don't know if they sell it directly or if they just, they do have things there that they do sell, but a lot of that can be purchased through catalogs, etc., where they're not the direct ones. But if you're selling anything, then you have to pay a sales tax on top of that. So the tax burden here on small businesses, people that are self-employed, quickly can be more than 50%. When you look at the entire tax burden on a company, it can be 60% or higher. So this is why it is so important to plan, to look at what the entire picture. What are you expecting? What kind of revenue are you going to expect? What are the taxes going to be on that revenue? And making sure you have a plan in place to meet and address all of those. So there's still plenty of issues here. And one of the things we're going to touch on probably next time is the SBA, funding your small business. Definitely want to talk about some of the pitfalls, and we're seeing a lot of issues with this. So go to look at this article real quick from the SBA, 10 steps to start your business. And this is really, this is how larger companies do it. And even smaller companies, you should look around and check. So you could be the best studio director or studio and ballet instructor out there. But look at your market research. If you already have 5 dance studios in the area, going and opening another one, there might not be a lot of demand for your services, especially if they've been around for 10, 20 years, like a lot of them have. It might not be the best place to open. So you have to know if there's demand for what you're presenting. Are there people lined up? Are there people wanting to use your services? Create a business plan. And not only having a roadmap will help you plan out what needs to be done for your business, that will help other people invest in your company, have confidence, sign on for your business, and support your business. Funding your business, again, what kind of starting capital will you need? For me, when I launched my law firm, it was the sale of a house. And that enabled us to, at first it was just solo mio, working out of my home. And I bought into a lead source. And then I didn't just rely on that. I went out and I networked and got other sources. But one of my biggest sources of income, my first year or so, couple of years in business, is something we still rely on today, was gaining access to leads, people that I could talk to and actually needed my services. And I had to fund the business. So this is where you're going to get the capital. Either you have personal capital you're going to invest in your company, or you have to raise it with investors or borrow it from somebody, and that can include either private or going to the SBA. So where you're going to operate, how you're going to operate, makes a big difference. If you have a brick and mortar location, there's a lot of costs that go with that. If you have an online store, if you need to go over the taxes, legal requirements, and revenue. So be aware of the different, this is really where you need to talk to a professional. Run your business plan by them. See what they think. Your business structure, and this can change. But are you going to start off as a sole prop? If you're going to start hiring people right away, and you have a lot more inventory or investments coming in your business, you might want to jump directly to an LLC or an S corp, or even you might even consider a partnership, depending on who's going to be in your business. Again, this should be fairly easy, but something that works. Registering your business with the state, very important here. And then getting federal and state tax IDs, depending on what kind of taxes you have to pay. Then you have to apply for licenses and permits, and then they recommend opening a business bank account. But this is all plan. I would suggest getting a business bank account sooner. The moment you're going to start spending money on your business, and again, this happens with when you register your business, you plan things out. Up to where you're planning, that's great. But the moment you start spending on your business, you should have a business account. And that's where the funds to support it should go, so you can start tracking that. So this should be done earlier in the process before you spend any money on it. And you can put your time, your sweat equity in the business, but the moment you put money in it, that's when you need to keep track of it. So I didn't even talk about today's article. I'm going to jump to it real quick. And we're going to touch on this. So again, the SBA has all kinds of help here. There's webinars for small businesses, workshops, meetings, seminars. So today's article is really there's a lot of tax resources here. There's connections to this Self-Employed Tax Center. You can get a lot of information from irs.gov and the SBA. Doesn't mean the IRS is your friend, but they do put out good information. And part of being a small business owner is you need to be informed, or you need to have professionals surrounding you that are informed. So that way you can build your business, and all that sweat equity, all this time that you put into it can be successful for you and your family. So again, it might very well pay huge dividends to check into these webinars, workshops, meetings. The government actually does, even they're going to tax you to death. They do want you to be successful. And scary thing is today we're seeing thousands of business close. It's tough out there. If anybody's thinking about going in the real estate market, now is not the time. I talked to a realtor the other day, and I said, look, we should pray for our local realtors. And she laughed. She goes, yeah, it's bad. A lot of businesses are out there suffering. A lot of businesses are closing down, and they're dealing with the aftermath of this. So as we go through this, probably touch on some of these videos and what needs to happen. But again, I feel like I'm just rushing through this because there's so much information. So we're going to continue the conversation tomorrow about running a small business now that we have it set up and in place. And I hope you guys have a great day. Stay informed, and again, being connected with good people to help you and support you in your business is invaluable. So again, we'll talk about some of those connections and how to help your business long term tomorrow when we come back. So have a great day, and thank you for tuning in here at smartmoneyculture.tv.